one of the hardest things for an investor is actually to keep an open mind in front of compelling data. And today the data is compelling and unfortunately is also against human nature. Today we're going to challenge the dividend investment theory and of course the idea of a passive income. I'm Alberto and my goal is to find out the best investment strategy using data, back search, and of course a little bit of my own experience. So if you're ready to Jindex, welcome to Jasper's Door. Dividend yield investing. Is this a great passive income method or a bad idea? We're going to dive into it today, check out the data and see what's up. So what's a dividend? A dividend is just extra cash that a company may have. And what can happen is that the board of directors decided not to invest that cash within the company, but to distribute it to the shareholders. And so what happens to you is that as a shareholder, you receive a little bit of money, usually in the scale of 1% to up to 6-7% if they're good companies. And you receive a little bit of money just for holding the shares. And that, of course, makes a lot of people happy because the prevalent school of thought is we're going to get money for nothing, just for holding some piece of paper, also from holding some virtual ownership of a company. And it makes total sense to me because like sitting on a certain amount of stocks and getting paid 2%, 5% for doing nothing makes it just a matter of how much money I can invest, how much money I can park into this company in order to get this payment out. And if you look out there, you see how many companies are paying good returns. And especially when you compare it to the S&P 500, it looks like it's a great bet, especially if the company historical returns are growing and growing, especially if the company historical yield is growing. There are some companies that are increasing the dividends every year, say Johnson & Johnson, for example. They are creating this loop where if you hold on to their shares, you will always get some money out, no matter if the share goes up and down. As a side note, this is still part of the value series from the Morningstar style box that for some reason is considering dividend yield as a way to track value. I totally disagree with it. I don't see any connection, but again, this is Jasper's Door, and we as a channel, we are challenging everything out there and see if what we are proposed, the data we're getting, the information that we're getting from these big names are actually correct. And well, stick around, especially in the next video, we're going to wrap this all up with the price to cash flow and then compare all the results. So stick around with that, subscribe to the channel. You're going to see very soon what this is all about. Today, though, we're going to work around building a Jindex for the dividend yield. And if this is your first time here, a Jindex is a DIY investable index that is created to follow and to grow your money, because that is your main goal. And if you have different goals, you can build different Jindexes. And most importantly, you will not have to use ETFs or bank-made products because that's where your interests are not primary anymore, but the interest of the issuer becomes primary. And therefore, we saw it in the last video, you may not receive actually what you pay for. For today, we're going to consider a global stock universe. So every country is valid and we're going to sort it by dividend yield. So the top dividends paying companies sit at the top 10%, so which is the 10th decile. Bottom decile, there's no dividend paid, and that represents all the smallest company that don't pay any dividends. In order to run this experiment, we're going to go through each of the decile. Again, it's a global universe. And within each decile, we're going to pick 50 stocks randomly, completely randomly. It does not matter what is the background. We're going to repeat that 5 times for each decile, and we're going to run it from the 2000 to present day. If you want to copy this, if you want to replicate this experiment, you can do it at home. There's a code, there's a link in the description that brings you to the code. You can just copy paste it and press play. You're going to see the results yourself. On the chart right now, you're going to see developing in front of your eyes the average of those experiments, for the first decile, there's no dividends paid there. Fifth decile, that's more a control group. 10th decile, that's where all the dividends are paid, or the highest dividend yield is paid. And what happens in there is that because dividend yield is not a factor, we do not expect these lines to be too much straying too much from each other. And in order to control the results, we have also a random group, same Jindex rules. So 50 stocks are refreshed every 6 months, but out of that universe, they are picked absolutely randomly. So that's our control group. If you have good factor investing like value, you will outperform that random every time. And if you didn't see that video, we know already that the S&P 500 did not outperform that. Actually, it did underperform it by 50%, which is kind of incredible. But back to the dividends, and let's play it and see what happens. And I do think it's pretty telling that this chart is showing the 10th decile and the 5th decile to be at the bottom of the whole chart. And then the random is just there in the middle with the first there on top. But I think we're going to have a much better view if we're going to change the way we visualize the data. And this chart, I do believe, brings a much stronger message. First of all, left side of the chart, first decile, no dividends. Right side of the chart, 10th decile, maximum amount of dividend paid. And you can tell already there's a slope that from the first to the 10th, there's a little bit of a slope where the lower decile promise higher returns over time compared to the 10th decile and the higher dividend yield. One thing we should probably pay attention to is the fact that in between that first decile and the 10th decile, there's not much space there. In fact, it's probably a 3% return. And while that slope is kind of consistent, that you can see there's somewhat consistency in it, is very narrow as well, which confirms that dividend yield is not a factor, it's not an investing factor. We already played around with value and small caps, and we saw how the difference in between being exposed to a good factor and the difference between not being exposed is massive. 10%, 50% difference in between being exposed to the right factor to not being exposed to the factor. So that is an incredibly efficient way to invest. While here, the difference is not big at all. In fact, I would say if you were to zoom out and actually see it with the lenses of other factors, this would look pretty much flat, telling me that there's not much of a difference if you invest with or without the dividend yield. And this kind of results we also see in real life with other ETFs that are out there selling dividend products. This VanEck is around 11% since inception. We do have a BlackRock iShares up there, 9% since inception. This I do by the colors, I would say, is Vanguard. Dividend yield ETF at 7% since inception. So you can see that the returns are definitely there. So what do we learn out of all of this? I would say quite confidently that chasing dividends does not provide any advantage to the investor. And the reason for that, I do believe, is quite simple to understand when you see it in the right way. Say you have some money in your back pocket, and someone comes and pickpockets you of the 5% of whatever you have in your pocket. So if you have $100, you pickpocket you 5%, so that's $5. But then instead of stealing them, it turns around and go like, "Hey, sir, here's $5." And how would you feel? Would you just go like, "Hey, this is nice. I did not expect that. I will accept $5. It's a beautiful day. I am happy. I didn't have to work for it. I got extra money in." Now, this does not change the amount of money you had on your person. That does not change your wealth. It just makes you feel better. And that's unfortunately what is happening with dividends. So when we do research on a company and we want to know how much the company is worth, what we look at, and obviously this is a major oversimplification, but what we look at is asset and income, right? So we look how much the company owns, including money, including cash. And we also look at what would be the future income that this company will produce. But if this company decides to pay out some dividends, these dividends comes from the company assets, they comes from the company cash. And therefore, when they give you the dividends, the company has the exact same values minus the dividends. So there's no change to your own wealth. You still own the same number of stocks, just the value of those stocks is just a little bit less. And that gap is exactly the amount of money you receive in terms of dividends. By using the data and keeping that in mind is very easy to understand when you look at this chart. Again, left side, first decile, no dividends. Right side, 10th decile, very high dividends. It goes in between. You can see it in the yellow line. It goes in between 0 and up to 8%. You can see the correlation. The correlation is obviously negative in this case, but the higher the yield, the higher the dividend, the lower the return. Now, some of the smart people will come up and say, hey, if I keep buying high dividend yield stocks, and therefore I sit myself in the 10th decile, I would receive the 11%, which is a little bit lower, we get that, but also on top of it, I will receive the yield, the dividends. And while I do understand that kind of thinking, that is also wrong. Because as you remember, in order to achieve these returns, we had to reinvest all dividends. All right. So every time we received the payment, we didn't pocket it, we didn't make it a passive income, we had to reinvest in order to achieve 11%. So the difference in between the white column and the yellow line is not something you can add up in your pockets. Okay. It's just to understand the correlation in between the two data points. In fact, if you were to plot it on this chart, and please keep an eye on the 10th decile, that's where all the highest paying companies are. If you were to pocket all the dividends along the last 25 years and put it in your pocket like a passive income, you will get a very sad result. And you would sit down there where you would not be compounding at all. And that is why I say don't fall for the allure of the passive income. Unless possibly like this outcome could be actually a good outcome if you're already retired, if you built a whole portfolio of dividend paying companies. But in that case, possibly it would be just better if you put it in companies that have higher expected returns. And what you do is when you're ready, you get out of some money out to pay you for your own expenses in life. But apart from that one particular example, I don't see why anyone should invest in dividends. There's no benefit into it. In fact, you will leave some money on the table if you will not expose yourself correctly to factor that makes your expected return higher. So again, don't fall for the lure of passive income. And in fact, when you have to compare the results of a high dividend strategy, they don't rank really high at all. This is the Jindex leaderboard. This is the results of different strategies that we'll be testing on this channel, but also that we will keep updating every week. So please subscribe to the channel. If you want to see the results and the research behind each one of these outcome, please go to justazo.com/leaderboard. So let's have a little chat in between the two of us. If you are a dividend investor, I understand if you were to feel frustrated right now, if you were to feel angry, or you are in disbelief, it's totally normal. And I've been there myself, not with dividends, but I've been a trader for a while and that didn't work out for me. And I lost 4 years of my life to that. So I totally understand if what you're seeing today comes a little bit as rubbing you in the wrong direction, which is fully normal. But you can recognize a good investor, smart investor, if they can adapt with new data coming up. And this is one of those times. Instead of keep going with what you have, which is definitely something that you have built. You can take what is good out of it, which is the discipline of being an investor, the risk management of being an investor, and take that and apply that to a strategy that is proven to work better for you. On this channel, you will find at least 3 strategies that will definitely be investing in the dividend yield. And don't beat yourself up too hard. Like, there's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of mix and match. There's a lot of rookies that try to be gurus. There's a lot of people that pretend to be expert, and they're just grabbing money. And sometimes, and this is the worst part, sometimes the information comes from places of authority, of places where they have hundreds of analysts researching this thing, and yet the information that comes down to us for a reason or another, and sometimes it's for the wrong reason because the interest is different than yours, is the information is just wrong. So don't beat yourself too hard, and just adapt. Now you have new information. This is a new day, and it's probably one of those things where now you have new data. You can change the trajectory of your life, and you should be celebrating. In the meanwhile, if you're not a dividend investor, share this video with someone that is a dividend investor, and maybe we can do good for more people. You are on Jasper's Door.